This is Alexander himself, giving a lesson in his 87th year, shortly before he died. Notice the way he uses his hands to gently guide and shape his subject. He believed that if you could stop people doing what was wrong, the good posture would emerge naturally. We shall see, however, whether Alexander's ideas can withstand the test of scientific examination. Alexander was particularly interested in racehorses and firmly believed that he could spot a potential winner simply by the way the horse carried its head. He knew that in his human subjects, the head-neck relationship had a profound effect on posture and movement. Alexander's observations have been confirmed many times by professional horse trainers. Danny Pevsner is one of Britain's foremost teachers of dressage. He trained in the Spanish riding school in Vienna. Some years ago, a serious back problem threatened his riding career, and it was this that brought him into contact with the Alexander technique. He soon realized that the way the Alexander teacher tries to impart coordination to the human body was very similar to the way the dressage teacher trains a horse. By means of a variety of subtle signals, the rider teaches the horse new ways of moving, improving the head-neck relationship and eliminating the bad to let the good come through.
I'm going to guide you into standing. Now,
Most people who have Alexander training experience a general sense of mental and physical well-being.
But all I'm doing is making sure that we don't get the pulling back of the head in the way that we sometimes get.
Chris Stevens is a physicist and an Alexander teacher. As part of a research scholarship, he's now attempting to analyze the effects of Alexander training minutely and scientifically.
I knew from the research that had been done by Dr. Barlow and Professor Jones that objective changes do take place. They had measured them. What I was interested in was why these changes take place, what mechanism in the body changes them. And this led me to consider the neck reflexes. The neck reflexes have been quite extensively studied, and we do know that they have a very, very powerful role on posture and movement control.
You can inhibit the neck reflexes almost completely by holding the head rigid in a neck splint. Could it be that bad posture impedes these vital reflexes? Alexander's emphasis on freeing the head and neck may have been one of the first insights into the importance of the neck reflexes. The subject finds it extremely difficult to keep her balance.
The electrodes on here, and then when we look...
At King's College, part of London University, Chris Stevens is working in the biomechanics laboratory to find out what actually happens when people have Alexander training. One of his volunteer subjects suffers severe back pain. Electrodes are placed over her individual muscles in order to measure the amount of work they do during simple movements like sitting and standing.
Right, so if you'd like to just buckle the belt on, please, Joanna. The reason for having the belt is that we've got a pack here which is going to send the messages from the electrodes down the wires into the computer. The computer is going to receive messages through the cameras about where your body is, and through the wires here about what your muscles are doing at the same time. Just stand up quite normally.
Chris wants to find out if there are any changes in these measurements once his subject, Joanna, has had a course of Alexander lessons.
Okay, when you're ready, now.
A force plate on the ground measures the total amount of effort Joanna uses to stand up. Then the data from the electrodes and the force plate is combined via a computer with images from a video camera. This will provide a detailed analysis of the efficiency, or lack of it, with which Joanna is using her body. Before Alexander training, we can see that she throws her head back in a very pronounced way when standing or sitting.
So we're working on the table now, Joanne, because one of the things that we saw in the initial test was that the back muscles and the neck muscles are a little bit tighter than they should be. And by having you lying down like this, we can, in fact, give you the experience of what it's like to have the muscles freer and longer. As a person has more lessons, we find that the amount of force they have to use for the same movement goes down anything between 10 and 50%. And the amount of activity in the back muscles is similarly reduced, anything up to 50%. Okay, go.
A mere 6 lessons later, the head retraction is much less marked. The computer shows that Joanna doesn't bend so far forward when standing, putting much less stress on her back muscles. Compared to the reading from the force plate taken before Alexander lessons, the present reading shows a big saving in effort.
Here we have a very ordinary, mundane example. We all get in and out of chairs. But here we're seeing that ordinary, everyday action being carried out for maybe 20 or 30% less energy. And this is just one example. If we extend this sort of thing across the board in our activities, we're going to be left with a lot more energy and a lot less wear and tear on the body in general.
If Joanna's using 30% more effort than she needs every time she moves, then it's hardly surprising she suffers from back pain. This gives some quantitative support to the idea that back pain is often a symptom of stress. Dr. Barlow.
I think the Alexander technique is a very effective way of reducing the fear of stress and also maintaining a decent state of rest in your body when you are under considerable stress. But the much bigger field that Alexander helped with is the field of what are called stress disorders. That's high blood pressure, insomnia, coronaries, I suppose, chest disorders of various kinds.
Walk this way. That's it, quite normal. And then if you like, sit in the chair, Jake will take your blood pressure.
Recent research has shown that Alexander training is successful in producing a sustained reduction of blood pressure in people suffering from hypertension.
You can keep your arm nice and straight.
The muscles themselves exert pressure on the blood, constricting the arteries and veins. So perhaps the blood pressure drops following Alexander training because there's a reduction in the level of muscle tension. The prospect of being able to treat some people for high blood pressure without the need for powerful drugs is very attractive indeed.
Just as with the head, it's not that I'm making something happen. My job is to allow you to let the body work as it should. So as you can feel, there's no pressure from my hands on you. They're just simply there to be more sensitive so that you can allow the body to work naturally.
Alexander training has been known to improve the lot of people suffering from asthma and other lung disorders.
We're not here to do anything, and neither am I. We're simply here to not interfere with what is natural. And as you can feel, the minute we get the release, then we get a nice change in the breathing, and everything else is working very naturally and easily. Now we're going to encourage even more of that now by putting you into the position of mechanical advantage.
Almost invisible alterations to one's posture can have profound effects on one's breathing.
That's it. Lovely. We'll go over to Jane now, and she's going to do a test on your lung function.
Okay, so if you want to fill your lips around here and take a deep breath and sort of breathe out rather like a huff.
The lungs are tested by measuring the maximum volume of air you can breathe out in a second. It's a test that's very hard to cheat. After a single lesson, this subject's forced expiratory volume increased by 30%.
It's 400.
Oh, she's gone.
Mervyn Waldman has been extending the use of the Alexander technique in another direction. Francesca suffered serious brain damage at birth.
We first sensed that something was wrong when she was about 3 or 4 months old, and she was a lot more floppy than most babies of her age. And it took us a long time to convince normal doctors that there was something wrong. And when she was about a year old, they did admit that something had happened to her, possibly when she was born or when she was still in the womb. And they suggested physiotherapy first of all, and she didn't respond at all well. It seemed to be a very insensitive way of approaching her problem. She just got very miserable.
Now we're just going to spend a few minutes growing and growing and growing, showing everybody how nicely you can grow. Where can you put your No.
Mervyn Waldman's success in helping Francesca, a child too young to have any intellectual understanding of the Alexander technique, demonstrates, along with the scientific evidence, that Alexander training directly influences the postural reflexes, establishing good balance and coordination, grace and economy of movement.
Good. And now we might come down again. Beautiful, like a little dancer. And again. And again. You can sit again. Lovely. Very free. Move your head very light. Good girl. Good girl.
It must be about a year now, I think, that we've had lessons intermittently. More so in recent weeks, when I feel that she's more capable now of understanding what I'm trying to convey, both verbally and with my hands. Up till now, she's had manipulative treatment to try and establish some stability in her body and some strength. Now that that is developing, she's much more ready to manage on her own with the guidance of the Alexander technique.
Find the bigger space, please, and Nigel, use all the space in the room.
At Earlswood First School in Red Hill, the teachers have been using a modified version of the Alexander technique in the classroom.
Often, it's almost every day, we use 5 minutes in the morning or the afternoon to just stop when I feel things are getting perhaps a bit stressful or fraught, and we stop and we do our lying down routine, just as a valuable time to be still during the busy school day, and I feel the children and myself benefit from this.
And close your eyes. Have a little space between your knees. Have a little space between your feet.
It would be so much easier if we could prevent people from acquiring bad posture to begin with. As we've seen, good posture isn't just sitting and standing up straight. It has to do with using our 600 or so muscles in a balanced and coordinated way so that we don't distress our bones, our tissues, and ultimately ourselves.
Heads down and roll over onto your tummy. Keep those heads down. Don't poke your heads up. As we walk our hands back, up you go. Let me see a nice straight back. Hands by your sides.
George Orwell once said, by the age of 40, you get the face you deserve. Perhaps the same aphorism applies equally to our bodies. If most of us are using nearly twice as much energy as we need to every time we move, it's hardly surprising that at the end of a long day, all we can do is collapse in a heap.